Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show. But instead of episode 38, we're holding off for a week for that. Today, we're going to do the first of two special episodes that we wanted to do, where we're focusing on one specific topic. And one of them coming up in the future is we're going to destroy PragerU, but that's going to take so much research and decide what videos we want to destroy, so that would take some time down the road. So instead, we're going to do the other special we wanted to do, and that is watch Kyle's Unpopular Takes video series. So back in September, I believe... What?
The funny thing with these is that on the Unpopular Takes, I think on all of them except maybe one, he still got like a 90% like rate, and even the one that wasn't so popular was still like 85%.
Yeah, so back in September, Kyle did a huge video series called Kyle's Unpopular Takes, where he says his opinions that he thinks his audience would disagree with him on. But reality, as I think I watched almost all of them, pretty much all of them we agree with as progressives. Like, pretty much everyone agreed with him in that regard, which made it funnier. Like, the only people that would probably disagree with him are, like, far lefties or maybe idiots on the right still. But otherwise, there was probably nothing really wrong with what he said. So we're finally going to watch him and see how unpopular his unpopular takes are. So, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
This is going to be a long one, too, because I thought there was 8 videos, but it turns out there's actually 10 of them. And some of them are, like, over 10 minutes long. So, here we go. This is the first one on his list, and that was about guns.
So, for the first time in a very, very long time, I'm actually on vacation this week. This segment that you're watching now was recorded a week earlier. I'm not going to follow the news as closely while I'm on vacation, but I wanted to leave you guys with some content. And I decided to do Kyle's Unpopular Takes. I asked you guys once on Twitter if that's something you'd be interested in, and a lot of you said absolutely you'd be interested in that. There's another reason I'm doing this, though, as well, which is I find that there's obviously a lot of different biases that mainstream media has, but there are certain incentives and biases that you have being in new media, and obviously I'm in new media. And one of those is you're really incentivized to sort of deliver your most loyal audience what they usually come for. And it really annoys me when people argue from narratives. Now, that's not to say that, like, some narratives aren't more true than others. Of course, I think some narratives are more true than others. But narratives are very rarely 100% correct. And I don't want to fall into the trap of not telling you guys exactly what I feel on everything just to appease you. I want to be honest with you and upfront with you, and if that means that it annoys some people, so be it, because I'd rather be honest and upfront than just simply feed you the stuff that you've come to expect. So, normally on this show, you guys come here, I'll give you the news, and I'll give you information, and then I'll give you my take, but most of the time, I'm just telling you what my popular opinions are. So when I'm arguing for increasing the minimum wage and UBI and universal health care and abolishing student debt and abolishing medical debt and ending the wars and you name it, all these things are phenomenally popular. So, I'm repping a position that most of the left agrees with, and I'm repping a position that most of the country agrees with. And so in some ways, that's really easy to just tell you guys exactly the things that everybody sort of already wants to hear. And again, with narratives, so MSNBC has a narrative. Democrats good. Fox News has a narrative.
If only I knew what part of the video he started talking so I could go to there.
Democrats bad on Fox News and Republicans bad on MSNBC. Corporate media, more generally, wants to defend the establishment no matter what. But even on new media, you can have people arguing the left flank of Congress is good. Well, not necessarily. There's plenty of times they've been weak and they've been pathetic, and you got to be honest about that and point that out. But there's also the narrative of all the politicians are bad and they're all equally bad. Well, sometimes maybe that's true, but there of course are instances where that's not true. And if you fall into if you end up only pushing that narrative, sometimes you're going to miss important nuance. Like, for example, all politicians can be bad and all politicians can be corrupt, but it also could be a wonderful thing that Joe Biden just withdrew from Afghanistan. You know, and sometimes if you believe too much in the narrative, it prevents you from being open and honest about the fact that withdrawing from Afghanistan was brave, and it took standing up to the military-industrial complex, and Joe Biden actually did that. So anyway, I digress. I hate arguing from narratives. I want to tell you guys exactly what I think all the time. And so that means I might be doing some segments here that'll piss everybody off. But we'll find out. We'll see. So Kyle's Unpopular Takes. You're going to have a bunch of different individual segments on individual issues where I'm not necessarily either with the left or I'm not necessarily with the majority of Americans or some mix. I'll explain with each and every one where I fall. But the first issue is guns. My take on guns is... Now, this is one where it's actually popular among the American people, but my take is not going to be popular among any political junkies. So, of course, I'm not with the right-wingers who think, like, no restrictions at all, and you should be able to buy whatever the hell the government has to prevent their tyranny. That's usually the line from the right. But I'm also not with some people on the left who look at a place like Japan and look at a place like Australia, and they see severely restrictive policies and say, well, that's great because there's 0 gun deaths, so we should do that. I think that this is an issue where you have to balance security and freedom. And that is... So sometimes there is a trade-off, and that's the most important point in this conversation. There's a famous quote from one of the founding fathers that says, people who sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither, or get neither, something like that. But no, sometimes there is a trade-off. So I just pointed out, Japan, they basically have guns banned, and there's basically no gun
They're
deaths.
not banned, they're just heavily regulated.
So it's a really restrictive regulation, and the end result is
Certain types are banned, but a lot aren't. They're just regulated majorly.
Yeah, to the point where even I think they're a little bit too restrictive on. But guess what? They have very few gun deaths. So they're doing the right thing is happening at the same time, and that's what matters.
Gun deaths. In Australia, they have very restrictive policies, too. I don't think it's as restrictive as Japan.
Well, since you're down under, what do you guys say about that?
He's pretty correct. It's, I mean, there are, as I said, there are a few types of guns that are banned, but it's not like a wholesale gun ban. We do have gun buybacks from time to time, which gets a lot of thing for money. Yeah. So we have barely any gun deaths. We don't have much. I mean, we still have violence, but the police are not like going around slow-moving genocide against their Aboriginal people like they are in America.
So you're saying gun confiscation, like conservatives say always happens down there, isn't true?
Mm-hmm.
I thought so!
Voluntary.
But they have very few gun deaths. Actually, I think they have a little more than Japan because they're slightly less restrictive. So there's a direct correlation.
I don't know how true this is, but I could have swore I saw a stat, like, on average, Japan has, like, 9 gun deaths a year.
Wow.
Just think about that. 9, possibly up to just 9 deaths a year for a country of 120 million people compared to over 11,000 in America, with just 3 times the population, pretty much.
Correlation between how restrictive you are with guns and how many gun deaths there are. So, but in my opinion, the way I look at this is, how much freedom and liberty am I willing to restrict to get the payoff of the security? And, I mean, I hate to make this analogy because it's pretty tired and played out, but I think it makes sense in this context. Look at cars. If I told you we could stop cars from going more than 20 miles an hour, put a hard cap on cars, and the fastest they can go is 20 miles an hour. They're made from now on where they literally can't go over 20 miles an hour. You'd look at that and say, I don't like that. Even if I told you we can cut driving deaths by 90%, or we could cut it 100%, and there's going to be no driving deaths, when now there's thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Shit, maybe millions. I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers. But you'd still probably look at that and be like, that's too restrictive. I don't want to do it. Now, we could up the line, right? I could say, what about 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour? Maybe by the time we get to 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, some of you would say, well, that's a fair regulation. I'd be in favor of doing that if it cuts down the number of deaths. But point is, there is a discussion to be had about how much freedom and liberty you want to sacrifice in order to gain the security. And
there is one problem, though, with the analogy you comparing guns to cars. Cars are not designed to kill people. They can, and they do, but that's not their main focus. Their main focus is transportation. Guns have only one reason, and that's to shoot and kill things. That's a little bit of a apples and orange comparison. And I'm pretty sure, I think I've looked this up too, because I think it was, because I deal with this with Harry before, I think it was up to 30,000 people in America alone die a year from car accidents and stuff like that. And I think the majority of them too are mostly drunk driving, stuff like that, or under the influence. Well, we do have regulations in that regard. Just guys keep people, just gotta encourage and stop people from driving drunk or on drugs and stuff like that, and that would massively cut down on it.
For me, when it comes to guns, I have a middle ground position.
What?
I'm just checking. Australia had about 1,200
That's my
fatalities in 2019.
And I'm sure if you looked up, it'd probably say the majority are drinking and driving or drugs or something like that.
Some forms of fatal five are usually the vast majority.
What?
It would be drink driving, drunk driving, inattention, excessive speed, and danger and other dangerous things. A lot of those.
I think most political junkies would look at as like a waffly position, and they wouldn't agree with it. So I'm in favor of the basic regulations that are brought up very often. I think we should have universal background check with strict rules, even to the point where some might call it discriminatory. If you were a former felon or if you had some severe mental health issue, I wouldn't allow you to get a gun. Now, again, some might say that's not fair, that's discriminatory against people with mental health issues, whatever. Sorry, there are some people who shouldn't have a gun, and you fall into that category if that's something that you've dealt with. It's tough to say, but I want to keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. Now, you're never going to do it perfectly, but that's a common sense place to start. So, universal background check with strict rules. I would ban high-capacity magazines for sure. For handguns, I'd be extra restrictive because it should require a permit, and it should require a certain test, because most crimes are actually committed with handguns. So I've cracked down a little more on those, even more than automatic weapons. So, that's the basic stuff I would do. My take on guns is to legalize, tax, and regulate. But bottom line is, I still want law-abiding citizens to be able to own weapons if they want to own weapons. It's funny because context is everything. When I was looking for a gun...
You say something?
Oh no, I'm just looking something up at the moment.
Protection, because of what I do for a living. And when you're going through that process, you're like, damn, this should be easier. This is too difficult. And you think, well, wait, no, because not everybody's just looking for self-defense or is going to be responsible with it. So there should be restrictions. But really, the compromise position, I think the middle ground position is try your best to keep the guns out of the hands of the people who wouldn't do good stuff with it, and try to get the guns in the hands of people who are either have it as a hobby and they're going to use it for target practice, or they're going to use it for hunting, or they're going to use it for self-defense and they're going to be really responsible with it. So when it comes to balancing freedom and security, I have a middle ground position for the United States of America. I have no doubt that in Australia they'd look at me and say he's massively pro-gun. And in Japan they'd look at me and say he's massively pro-gun.
Not
but in the context of the U.S., I'm just a moderate on the issue of guns.
You're a bit pro-gun. I'd say slightly pro-gun, but not like...
A gun nut.
Over pro-gun.
So, maybe we should go through this right now. So, what's your thoughts on guns in themselves?
They're means to kill.
I don't, like me, I hate guns. They're not allowed in our house. You're not allowed to bring them in our house. Our houses are completely gun-free forever. And I don't want to be around people that have them. Especially gun fuckers, which I'm around. And gun fucker is a term I made. Gun fucker is a term I made up a long time ago. It's like a more extreme version of gun nuts, where they're so obsessed with guns that I really, really, really do think they fuck them. Like, they come across that way.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I reckon they do as well.
Yeah, like, a lot of you guys are so obsessed with guns, you come across as crazy people to me. And the majority of Americans, too. Because remember, the vast majority of Americans, doesn't matter where you look at, the vast majority want some form of gun control. Remember, especially after like Sandy Hook. Like I remember Kyle covered stat right after the Sandy Hook shooting. It was like 90% of like Democrats, Republicans, gun owners, and even NRA members want some sort of gun control after that. So it is something that the vast majority of Americans want, but we don't get it because of the NRA and Republicans blocking everything. So now maybe we should go through the positions like Kyle just did too, and what you think about them. Like for me, here's for me. Like one background checks. That should be obvious.
That's an obvious one. Yep.
Also, although my state, for example, has it where you can't sell guns to like not at like a dealership or anything, that's not enforced where I'm at. So like if one of my neighbors, example, wanted to sell me a gun and I wanted to get it, I could just buy it like that. No background checks or anything, even though that's actually illegal. So I want that enforced more. I think that should be obvious. This one, to me, honestly seems more pro-gun than anything, but apparently people are too triggered by it. You should, if you want to get a gun, you should have a permit. You should have to pass, like, gun train. Like, if you want to drive a car, you have to get a driver's license. You have to pass a test. And that also makes you better using guns. So that's ain't pro-gun more than anything. If you're going to have a gun, don't you want to know how to use it properly so you can actually defend yourself and not hurt yourself or accidentally kill people and stuff like that? That seems reasonable. This one, like I already agreed to about, like, no felons should be allowed to have them. If you have a mental disability or whatever mental issue that could cause you to be dangerous, you should not be allowed to have guns. Pretty much think that's... Only gun nuts will probably think that's insane. And then, this is probably the most controversial one. But like Kyle, I do support, assault weapons bans. Sorry, I don't think you should be allowed to have guns. Like, and here's my definition of assault weapons, too. Assault weapons are like weapons like the military has. And stuff like that. To me, assault weapons like assault rifles and stuff like that the military use, to me, they're no different than like tanks, missiles, nukes, and all them. We all agree that no civilian should have those kind of things. Well, high-powered guns like them are also on that table for me. I'm much more strict on that. Now, I would not ban people being able to have those guns right now, because there's 300 million guns in the country. I wouldn't like force confiscate them. Instead, I would do a massive buyback program and offer
a few times.
Yeah, I would offer a gun buyback program and offer money that's so ridiculously large that even the most strident, hardcore gun fucker might actually change their mind on it. Like I remember, Kyle covered a story back in California right after Sandy Hook. They did a gun buyback program. It was pretty big too, but you know what they gave out? I think it was like somewhere between $20 to $100 gift cards, like at grocery stores. Like that really is not. That's not good enough for me. I want to get the people that are, like, gun fuckers are not going to be persuaded by that. I want to actually offer money, like in the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. I want everyone, even the most hardcore gun fucker, to consider maybe changing their mind on it and giving up those kind of guns. I want them off the streets as soon as possible. And that's the best way you're going to do that. So now, that's probably it on the issues. I'm pretty sure you agree on all those.
Okay.
Now, here's the problem. Well, here's the big problem, though, because throughout the world, we have all kinds of stuff with like strict gun control countries, less strict gun control countries, some of mixed, and we've seen countries all over the place doing different things. And they have very low death rate of guns, and we have high gun death rates, like we see with America. America, for example. It depends on the state. It's not federal, pretty much. Some states are very lax. Some states are very strict. So it depends. But as you see, with our mixed laws, we have some of the highest death rates in the world when it comes to guns, like 11,000 a year, I think it was. Then you have, but then you have places like Yemen, which have the most. I think they have the most guns per capita, even more than America, and they have high death rate. So, more guns, yet more people are dying. And I already know gun fuckers be like, they're being invaded by Saudi Arabia in a civil war. It still refutes your argument, so deal with it. And now here's something that actually gun fuckers use all the time. It's true. Switzerland. Switzerland has high gun gun ownership too, because they have conscription still, and you know how hardcore Switzerland comes with their defenses. They literally have mines in like mountains to blow up stuff if they were ever invaded.
Yeah.
Like they're like hive mind like Japan was in World War II. So because of that, all men from I think it was 18 to 29 for several decades, I think they're starting to change it now, not only were conscripted, but they were literally required to have guns at their house after they were done with service. Like everyone in Switzerland has guns, but guess what? They have low death rates. So that's a country where they have a lot of guns and there's not a lot of deaths. But then you have places like Japan and Australia where they do have much stricter gun laws. And guess what? No deaths in comparison to like America. So what all these places, they have different laws and such. How come the things are different? You have countries where they have high gun ownership, no deaths. High gun ownership, a lot of deaths. Strict gun laws, no deaths. And of course, there are places like Chicago, for example, where they do have strict gun laws, but they have a lot of deaths. So why do all these things have in common? I mean, why are there so radical differences with all these policies? It's simple. It all comes down to one thing. Gun culture. That's what it comes down to. Like in Japan, for example, because I actually read it up too several months ago when I first heard about this. In Japan, they literally, what's the word I'm looking for? They pretty much view guns as dangerous devices that only the police and military are allowed to use. And that was established hundreds of years ago when Japan had their isolationist period where they would ban guns completely from the country because they were afraid that the peasants in Japan would try like overthrow the emperor and all that. So only the emperor and all of them could have guns basically until like the 1800s when they finally westernized. So they have it like in their culture that guns are dangerous devices and no one should be allowed to have them. That's why they're so strict on it. Like I think in Japan too, they had where like they mostly did all the things that I said. They have like a very long wait period too. Like I think up to like a year or two before you can get a gun, and you have to join like I think like a hunting club or some like sportsmanship like club involving guns. Even if you don't want to do it, that's a little too strict in my eyes. But you get what I'm saying. They're more strict. Yeah, their gun culture views guns as dangerous things, and because of that, no one really has guns in Japan, and therefore no gun deaths. Now for Switzerland, they have a lot of guns, but their gun culture is guns are just for defensive purposes to protect us if we're invaded. So, and they also teach you smart gun usage and train you how to use guns for crying out loud.
Exactly, that's the big difference.
But in America, the gun culture in America is let live. If anyone wants a gun, you can use it. If you want to go into like restaurants, whoever. Open carrying your like assault rifle, you can go right ahead as you scare people out and stuff like that. That shit is the problem. America's gun culture is the problem. It needs to radically change, and then we can finally get shit done. But all you gun fuckers need to go the fuck away and stop flaunting your guns. Stop flaunting how much you want to fuck them and all that. Go away. You're the problem. And also, do not ever do that shit like in cities and suburbs. You don't bring that shit here, like you're flaunting your guns and all that. We ain't gonna like that. We're not gonna let you do that, and we're gonna have the cops arrest you for it. So don't try it. So that's pretty much it. So let's see what the rest of what Kyle says.
I want some reasonable regulations, but here's what I will admit that other people won't admit who even have my position. Right now we have 32,000 gun deaths. So because of our lax gun laws, we have 32,000 gun deaths a year.
I think like 2/3 of those were like suicides though, so that's why I only said 11,000.
Over 10,000 of them are homicides.
Yeah, that's what Kyle said. Like 10 to 11,000 are actual homicides, whereas the rest are suicides. And I didn't want to add that in to be like stupid libtard.
So if we implement the regulations I want to implement, which would make it a little stricter than it is right now, you're still going to have gun deaths. And so that number might tick down from 32,000, and that includes everything, suicides, homicides, you name it, accidents. That might tick down from 32,000 to, I don't know, maybe 12,000, 15,000 gun deaths a year. Now, granted, we cut it in half, right? Like, you cut the number of gun deaths in half by doing these regulations, so that could be viewed as a success. But the counter...
being more restrictive when it comes to guns would lower maybe like the homicide stuff. The suicide stuff, that is going to require interventions like suicide prevention while people are committing suicide. There's more to that than guns in itself. Like even if they don't have access to a gun, they're going to find another way to kill themselves.
Argument to what I'm doing. For people who care more about security and safety, they'd say, you're crazy to be okay with like 10 or 15,000 gun deaths. You're just going to accept that as like a price to pay for the the regulations you prefer? Like you wouldn't go further when there's still 10 to 15,000 people dying every year? And again, my response is, yeah, there's a certain amount of restriction of freedom and liberty that I'm uncomfortable with and I don't like. And again,
I think most, like I said before, I think most of those deaths, even if like restricting gun usage did lower it, I think the rest of them is that's just going to require like gun culture change, to be honest with you, because like we said, Japan just like Japan, 9 deaths per year, I think the stats was I saw. So obviously there's something working where you can get down to a very minuscule amount for a huge ass country like Japan. But America needs to not only have better gun laws, but we also need to change gun culture. That needs to change too.
I'll come right back to the car example.
Definitely.
If we can make them only go 20 miles an hour, we'd probably have no car deaths every year. Or if you cut it 90% or 95%. Should I be in favor of doing that? I would say no. I don't think I think the freedom and the liberty and the convenience that comes with being able to go faster is worth it, even though there's going to be some percentage of people, some number of people that end up passing away in car accidents. So
that's usually because of like reckless driving and drunk driving, stuff like that.
Drink driving,
not paying
extreme speed, and
like the speed itself isn't necessarily the issue. It's how the driver handles stuff like that. That's usually the problem.
Not killed a single person. Suddenly becoming stationary. That's what gets you.
We need to be honest with ourselves.
Or losing control of your car due to going excessively fast.
That oftentimes in society, we do have to balance different things, different values, different things that are positive, and balance different things that are negative. And there is a trade-off there, and I'm going to be honest about it. I'm not going to lie to you about it. Other people might lie to you about it. Like people on the right say, no, if you have the wild, wild west and anybody can buy whatever gun they want, that actually makes you more safe. Well, all the evidence and data shows that's not true. The more guns...
Well, it depends on the factors. Like in Yemen, no. Switzerland, yes.
People have access to, the more gun deaths there are. That's not rocket science, and that's proven time and time and time again. So they're not telling you the truth. The left isn't telling you the truth. If they're in favor of, like, gun banning, they're not telling you the truth that is a restriction on personal freedom and liberty. They want to, maybe phrase it as something else or name it something else. But no, that even though you can get down to 0 gun deaths or maybe 100 gun deaths a year, some tiny number, if you ban guns and confiscate all the guns, that is a restriction on freedom and liberty. And you may end up increasing safety, but the price you pay is law-abiding citizen who wants to own a gun can't own a gun. And are you okay with that? So it's a sticky issue. And I will say, this is one I've gone back and forth on, by the way. When I was much younger, I was more of like a hardcore libertarian on this issue, and I used to say whatever people want, they should be able to own, and I believe the nonsense line is to stop government tyranny. No, it's not. They have nuclear weapons. They have a military. They could... Any rebellion they could quash in a second, so it has nothing to do with that. So I used to believe the libertarian position, then I kind of got more restrictive as I got older. Now I think I've sort of balanced out, and I'm somewhere in the middle where I understand you're trying to balance freedom and security. And the line that you draw is relatively arbitrary, and it's subjective, and it's based on, how much are you willing to prevent deaths, and how much are you willing to cut it, but also how much are you willing to cut into people's freedoms and liberties in the process. And so, this is one of those things where everybody just has an opinion. There is no, like, hardcore answer here. And this is one that I was mixed on. I had hard opinions on it, then I was mixed on it, now I'm super mixed on it, and I think I just landed in this middle ground position where I'd be in favor of some more basic regulations, but I would definitely stop short of saying, we should confiscate guns or we should ban guns or whatever, and we can't really do that.
That's an extremely small position, though, among Americans, even among, like, liberals, for crying out loud. I actually saw a study on this a few years ago. I think it was only up to, like, 20 to 30% of like liberals or Democrats actually support gun confiscation, stuff like that. And Democrats, remember, only like 25% of the population or so. So it's a very small number of people you're talking about. That's not a big majority as people think it is.
But this puts me in a position where I'm with the majority of Americans because the polls show they're with me on the specific regulations. But in terms of the political junkies, obviously the right doesn't like that I advocate for increased regulation. And many on the left wouldn't like that, I don't go further. There are many on the left who want to really restrict guns, some who are open about just wanting to ban guns and catch up to many European countries. In some European countries, the cops don't even have guns. So there you have it. First issue where I sort of deviate from perhaps what may be expected of me, guns, and I got a lot more of these issues where I have my own takes that don't really put me in a political camp or a political home, so buckle up for those.
So, between you and me, do you think that's an unpopular take of his? Because I don't.
No, it isn't.
And I don't think that's an unpopular take among even progressives in his audience. That's more of... The only people he would piss off are gun fuckers and, like, the, maybe, like... I would not say far left, because the far left a lot of times are actually pro-gun, remember, like hardcore socialists. It would probably be more like suburban, like rich suburb, like women, basically. Those are usually people that want to ban guns more. But yeah, that was pretty well interesting. But yeah, honestly, I think gun fuckers are gun fuckers that advocate like everyone carrying guns are way more of a thing and a threat than people actually want to ban guns.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a very good one. That was the first one, so now we don't have to worry about that long-ass intro Kyle did. So now the next one, conservatism.
Kyle's unpopular opinions, conservatism. What do I think of conservatism? Well, I did a video on this like 10 years ago or something crazy, but I wanted to reiterate this point because I think it's important. My unpopular take on conservatism is this. I could very easily imagine a situation wherein I become a conservative. What? What does that mean? Let me explain. So one of the definitions of conservatism is abiding by tradition and doing things the way that we used to do things because we think that's the best way to do things. Now, right now, under the current system, I'm the furthest thing from a conservative. I'm not conservative at all. I think the way we do things is terrible. I think we need to fix it. I believe in progress. I believe in change. Obviously, I believe in whatever you want to call it, a version of populist leftism or social democracy or libertarian socialism, whatever you want to call it, a mix of thereof. But right now, in the future, if we get to a certain point, I might become a conservative. So if you put me in a time and a place where I think things are working relatively smoothly, boom, I'm a conservative. So if we lived in a country where we had Medicare for all, free college, a living wage, we ended the wars, we abolished student debt, we abolished medical debt, we gave people paid time off by law, we had higher unionization rates. If we lived in a country that already solved what I think are the big problems, then I'm a conservative. Because I'd say, no, I don't want to change much. I want to keep things functioning as is. And if you have brilliant ideas that come along that like, oh, we're going to fix this even more, I'd say, whoa, but things are working well. You better be damn sure that whatever you're trying to implement would actually make things better. Because I think there are ideas on the left that are somewhat utopian and haven't really been tested, and if you implement them, it might make things fall apart. And so I'd be the one. There's a famous saying. Somebody said a conservative is somebody who stands there with their arm up, trying to stop history or something like that. I butcher the quote, but you get the gist of it. Yeah, I would be that person if we lived in a functioning country and we had good policies already in place. So, because there's some people who would say, no matter what, I want progress. I want change. I want to improve things. I want to always work on improving things. I'm one of the people who says, when we get to a place which realistically seems like it might be as good as it can get, and obviously there's a value judgment in there and you have to determine when you think we're at that place. But if we get to a place like that, I would instantly become a conservative. And I think I'd even be allowed an aggressive conservative. Be like, why do you want to change shit? It's working really, really well. So it wouldn't be that difficult for me to get to a place where I'm a conservative. But obviously right now we're nowhere near that place, so I just don't really talk about that. But if we lived in a highly functioning country where workers, were paid well, and we had free college and a living wage, and we ended the wars, and we had free healthcare and all these things, suddenly, all of a sudden, I'd be arguing like, guys, we have a pretty sweet deal here. So maybe pump your brakes on any sort of utopian, goofy ideas to make too much change too fast. So anyway, that's my view on conservatism. Obviously, my current view on conservatism is, if you are conservative in this current system, you're not paying close enough attention.
Yep. So, what do you guys say about that? Do you think that was an unpopular take?
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a bit hard.
Like, for me, I cannot ever imagine myself, even if I was in a progressive country and all that did everything I want, I can't ever imagine myself being a conservative, because I know all the baggage that comes with, and I'm pretty sure even in the best place in the world, the conservatives in those countries are going to be like fucking like Christian fundamentalists and stuff like that, and I want nothing to do with that whatsoever.
Elements of that everywhere.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be more like the people that want to continue making things better, especially since the problem is, even in those places that are doing good, the conservatives in those countries usually do try to fuck things up, and we have to stop them at all costs. Like,
Yep.
Alright, so that one, we're not so sure about that being necessarily an unpopular take or not. So that's 1-0-1, I guess you could say. Alright, so the next one listed, next one, abortion.
My unpopular takes. Abortion. So let me be clear up front. Everybody relax. I would consider myself pro-choice. I think Roe v. Wade was determined correctly. The way in which I have an unpopular take on this is when you get to the details. The devil's in the details, and there's something I feel about abortion that doesn't really fit the standard left-wing mantra, and wouldn't be considered a popular thing among left political junkie circles. And I think my position would be popular among most Americans, but I don't actually know. It's possible I'm a touch more restrictive than most Americans. But my take has always been, I'm pro-choice, and the woman makes the decision, no question about it. But I do think late-term abortion is different. And my line that I start having a moral and ethical issue with it is pain. Fetal pain. Now, the reason why this is controversial is because this is actually, there's a right-wing trope about fetal pain, and there's another one about fetal heartbeat or whatever, where what they do is they pick a line that's way too early, and they say, from then on, like from day whatever, 6 or some shit, they make a lot of this stuff up. They're like, oh, it has a heartbeat. So from that day on, you can't do it. Can't do abortion. And even the fetal pain point, I think there's debate among some scientists. Some of this is politically motivated, some of it not, where they say, hey, where's the line where a fetus would feel pain? And some say it's earlier than others. And so this is often used as an excuse to push the line earlier and earlier, from which you ban abortion afterwards. And so I'm well aware that this is used in a way that's unfair, and that's false, and that's restrictive. So I want to be clear about that up front. But having said that, wherever the line actually is, where a fetus would feel pain when you do an abortion, after that, I have much more of an issue with it, because I think it's a different moral calculation. I think it's a different ethical calculation. And everybody draws a line somewhere. The question is, where do you draw the line? So somebody who's 100% pro-choice would say, birth. So, right before birth. So in other words, if a baby is 1 day from being born, mother should have the right to kill it. Kill it, mangle it, do whatever you got to do to get it out of there. But 1 day before birth, so even a fully formed baby, they should be able to do it. Late term is totally fine. That's the 100% pro-choice position. Now, you might not like the way I described it, but that is literally what it is. So, are you okay with going all the way up to that line? I'm not comfortable with that, because at that point, you basically have just a baby who happens to still be in the mother. So, it's a human being who happens to still be in the mother. So, I think that goes way too far. So, what's the line that I've come across that I think might actually more or less reflect what's the okay line? About 20 weeks. About 20 weeks. Roughly around where fetal viability is. That's when I think it's reasonable assumption to say the nervous system has been created.
Isn't that earlier than Roe v. Wade sets that? Ain't like Roe v. Wade like 24 weeks or something like that?
23.
What?
23.
Yeah, that's definitely even restricted in Roe v. Wade.
So the fetus can feel pain. So before that 20-week line, 100% pro-choice, woman can do whatever she wants to do. After that line, I think it gets really sketchy, and I think it's a totally different moral and ethical calculation. Now, I do have good news for everybody. Now I'm going from the data from years ago, but according to the Guttmacher Institute, it's something like 90 or 95% of all abortions in the U.S. happen before that 20-week or 22-week line.
Yeah, as we talk about in the show all the time. And then, like, the late-term abortions, like, the vast majority of them are usually, like, fatal fetal defect or life in the mother or something like that. Usually, women who have abortions early are the ones that don't want it, and the women that have abortions late, it's because of, like, some health risk, basically.
So, in other words, Roe versus Wade did allow for regulation of late-term abortion by the states. I think that's the correct standard. I think later they changed it to a fetal viability standard. There was another Supreme Court case. But I think Roe basically got it right, where they say, hey, before... They went by trimesters. Now they do it a little differently. But, like, if it's early, do whatever you want. If it's late, give the states the option to regulate it. And so I would regulate it for late term. I think only in very rare instances should it be allowed for late term. Like if there's rape or incest or the life of the mother is in danger, those are always exceptions. But outside of that, you can't just do it for any reason late term. But again, 90 to 95% of abortions happen before that fetal viability time and before the nervous system is created. So that's why generally I am pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. You can make the choice, and 90 to 95% of the time, I'm totally cool with it. But once you get after the nervous system is created and the fetus can feel pain, I'm not cool with it. But thankfully, I think in the U.S., even in those late examples where there happens to be late-term abortions in certain states, because some states ban them, usually it does fall into one of the categories of one of the exceptions.
That's pretty much all of them.
But if it didn't, I'd say no. Can't do it. Because it is a different moral calculation. When pain is involved, when the nervous system is created, that's very different from doing it really early on. You know, when you have gametes and you have zygotes and you have embryos and you have something that is fundamentally, even though eventually it would become a human, at that point is fundamentally something very, very different. And the moral calculation is different and it's easier, and I do lean more on the choice rhetoric in that instance. Again, I only hesitate for the late term stuff. So this clearly, again, this is an issue where I think most Americans would agree with me, or close to most Americans would agree with me on this, but I clearly am out of lockstep with my political tribe, my political camp. You know, I'm a lefty political junkie, and this is something that puts me out of step with pretty much all of the hardcore left political junkies. I mean, even listen, Bernie Sanders very clearly stated 100% pro-choice, basically up until birth. The woman can make the decision, the day before birth. And that's just something I totally don't agree with. I think that goes way too far, and I think it's sloppy thinking, too. I do. I think that if you fancy yourself pro-life in other respects, you know, pro-life as in against the death penalty, I don't think a late-term fetus is that much different than just a baby. You're literally one day removed from this thing being a baby out in the world. You don't think that's different morally than doing it at 6 weeks? It definitely is, and I think if people are being intellectually honest, they would admit that. So, anyway, that's my take on that. I got more spicy takes for you guys. Stay tuned. Kyle's Unpopular Opinions. I'm trying to piss everybody off. I'm trying to piss everybody off.
You're failing, though, Kyle.
Let it all hang out. Let everybody know everything I really think about the various issues. You guys hear my popular takes all the time. UBI, Medicare for all, free college, living wage, ending the wars, abolishing student debt, abolishing medical debt. You guys know all my popular takes. New Deal. Every now and then, I got to buck the trends and let you know the things that I think that wouldn't give me a giant audience. So, here it is.
All right, so we actually talked about this before when it comes to abortion. The polls showed it was like 50% of Americans think abortion should be legal in most cases. Not most cases, but it should just be, I guess, legal per se. I guess like the minimum. I think it was like 29% think it should be legal in all cases, and then only like 19% think it should be illegal in all cases. So yeah, the majority of Americans, in one sense, it's up to like 81% of Americans think abortion should be legal in some form. So yeah. He definitely has a majority take, and his take is the same as like my dad's or Hunter Avalon's. So, do you think that take is really unpopular?
No, it's pretty well bang on there.
So, what do you have to say about his take?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Although I'm more into that 30% camp. Alright, so now let's go on to the next topic, which is corruption.
Alright.
The unpopular angle of my corruption take is that I honestly think it should be punished just as severely as murder and assault and rape and terrible stuff like that. I think it should be one of the top felonies. I think it should be shamed societally in a way that is, again, only on par with the worst possible crimes, because corruption really is the heart of how our system got as bad as it is. If you didn't have the corruption, if you didn't have the big corporate money in politics, if you didn't have the billionaire money in politics, the system would just work better for regular people. The system would work better for the bottom 90%. People wouldn't be struggling as much as they are. It wouldn't be as disastrous as it is. So the unpopular part here is what I'm describing is viewed as sort of an anti-civil rights, civil liberties, human rights position, that you should punish corruption as harshly as, like, murder. That is not really a lefty position, I don't think. And some might even say it borders on, like, a dictatorial, authoritarian, tyrannical type thing. And I'd also, this is really spicy for everybody, I would sort of lower the bar, too, lower the standard. Because, right, it really is, you need to prove a quid pro quo. I don't think you should have to be able to prove a quid pro quo in order to find somebody guilty either. Because quid pro quo is notoriously difficult to prove, because you have to basically have people caught, like, on tape or on video going, I will give you X amount of money, and you will return this political favor for me and implement this policy which helps me personally. You're never going to get anybody like that, ever. Most of these things are implied. Most of these things are everybody be quiet, keep it on the low. It's all implied. I'll give you the money. You know what to do in return. If Raytheon or Boeing or Halliburton or whoever gives a bunch of money to a politician and the politician gets them a no-bid contract, what the fuck do you think happened there? Of course it's obvious what happened there. Of course it's legalized bribery. So I would drop the standard. You shouldn't have to prove a quid pro quo. It should be a much more lax standard, a much more lenient standard. So again, I think there would be civil libertarians who listen to me talking right now, and they would roll their eyes, and they would be like, you can't do that, you can't do a system like that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Punish corruption like it's murder, like it's rape, like it's assault, like it's one of the worst felonies that there is, and lower the standard. You don't have to prove a quid pro quo. And start cleaning up the system, man. Start cleaning up the system. Because it really is, this is the heart of all the problems in our system. So this is, now, this is one of those, I've never seen a polling question done on this, of course. It's too hard to poll a question like this. But this is one of those, again, I think civil libertarians will wince when they hear me talk about this. But I think this is one of those issues where maybe, even though this is one of Kyle's unpopular takes, I think you guys might like it. I think you might be like, yeah, I kind of like that. That makes sense. So anyway, that's my weird, different corruption take. Maybe I should take it out of the unpopular series, you guys tell me.
So, do you think that was an unpopular take?
Oh, not outside Washington, D.C.
So, I have a mixed thing on it. On the one hand, yes, the standard does need to be lowered, because it is you can easily look up evidence of corruption when you look at their politicians' voting records and how much money they're getting from places. That's very easy to prove there's a connection in that regard. I don't know about making I don't know about rape, but murder. In a probably majority of those cases, that's life imprisonment for life in prison for corruption.
In some cases, they'll even get you the death penalty.
Yeah, that might be a little bit too much for me, but yeah, they should definitely, unlike politicians or whoever, they should definitely face prison time for being corrupt. I don't know about all the way to life imprisonment and stuff like that, but definitely, and yes, it needs to be lowered. All right, so now on to the next unpopular take, which is cops. Oh, this will trigger Harry.
Oh, that's
All right,
absolutely
so
will.
my unpopular opinions: police, cops. This is going to be an interesting one. So, I am tough on crime in some ways. Let me explain what I mean. Everybody relax. I'm tough on crimes that I actually think should be crime. So when it comes to murder, assault, rape, robbery, war crimes, corruption, corporate crimes, I'm tough on crimes that I think should actually be crimes. Things that I don't think should be crimes, I'm obviously as lenient as it gets, and I think people should be free and probably paid reparations for having to go through any trouble because of it. So I would free every single nonviolent drug offender. I would free every single drug user. I would free every single, non-violent criminal. Save financial criminals who I think they do a different kind of violence.
Yeah, exactly.
So people on the left have this this label attached to them that they're like soft on crime and weak on crime. And I always had an issue with that because I'm certainly not soft on crime. I'm tough on crime. I'm only soft on crimes that I don't think are actually crimes. And I think that it would benefit the left if they took this position as well. So, yeah, if somebody commits a murder, somebody commits a rape or an assault or violent robbery or whatever, I don't really have sympathy for them. I think it's worth it to try to rehabilitate people, to make better people. But am I fine with giving people a strict sentence in a situation like that? I am. And I don't think there's anything non-lefty about that.
I don't even know who would argue against that either. That seems a little weird.
And by the same token, I think it's a contradiction to say, let's go soft on those sorts of crimes, but when it comes to international law, we want to rigidly enforce it and ruthlessly enforce it and punish America for violating all the international laws that we punish. Or, you look at Wall Street criminals and we say, we should have locked up more of the bankers. Right, we should have. We definitely should have. But that's a tough on crime position. And we should be clear that that's a tough on crime position. And so you have lefties who say, rigidly enforce international law, strictly enforce that. Good, I agree. So you're tough on crime there. Strictly enforce, the laws against Wall Street for the fraud and the corruption and the legalized bribery and all that stuff. I agree. All the corporations that violate various laws, and they violate a lot of them, strictly enforce the law against them, be tough on crime there. Agree with all that. Put George Bush and Dick Cheney, lock them up and throw away the key and give them their hearing, but they're going to be found guilty. Agree with that. You can't say I'm tough on crime in all these ways, but then when it comes to domestically, be soft on it. No. So I think I'm tough on crime across the board for things that should actually be crimes. So Wall Street, I go after them ruthlessly. Corporations who are breaking the law, I go after them ruthlessly. The United States and our allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, who are violating international law on a regular basis, on a routine basis, you go after them ruthlessly. Murderers, rapists.
Also should note there that a lot of people in the we are the only true left that is being drawn as ilk, think that Russia and China should be able to do whatever the fuck they want because of the West's history of imperialism, because it's all the imperialism when the West does it.
Yep. So far, this honestly kind of seems more like a straw man than anything. Have you seen anyone on the left, even the most crazy people that say we should go soft on murderers and rapists and stuff like that? I've never heard of that, and I've heard some really silly people on the left. This sounds more like a straw man Kyle's talking about. They should, of course, America, corporations, all them, they should face the same punishment as, like, murderers and stuff do. But so far, this seems more like a straw man so far. And also, he hasn't even really talked about cops. He's more like talking about, like, enforcement of crimes and laws.
Assault, grand larceny people, all that. Go after them ruthlessly. Be tough on crime. But free all the nonviolent drug offenders, free all the nonviolent criminals who didn't actually commit a crime. And by the way, cut police budgets and redouble their efforts towards going after actual criminals. You don't need to go after the homeless. You don't need to go after drug users. You don't need to go after people with mental health issues who just need help. The police should only be going after the real criminals. So that's why I have had an issue. I don't agree with like the defund the police slogan. Now, to be fair to the activists, when you talk to them, they're a lot more thoughtful than just the slogan defund the police, which sounds like they're saying abolish the police. That's what it sounds like they're saying. Now, again, if you talk to the activists, they're like, no, we're not saying that. We're saying cut the budget, put the money in other things that'll help the community, which is something we all agree with. But this is an issue I have with left activists in general, which is like, why do you phrase things in a way that turns people off the most?
Yeah, this is why we talked about this several episodes ago, and to Harry too.
Yeah.
Now, I do support defund the police as in terms of policies like cutting police budgets and stuff like that, but the slogan itself turns people away. Like, there was a poll, like, I remember, I think it was like a poll I covered with Harry one time. Like, at one point, I think defund the police has like a 9% approval rating or something like that. Like, the term, like, even among blacks and Democrats, which are the people that are most likely to support defund the police, it was only like somewhere between 20 to 40% that support it. Most Americans are not for the slogan. They don't support it. If anything, they want the opposite. They want police budgets risen. But do you know what they do support? Police reform, which would include defund the police, and polls, just the phrase itself, polls up to like 90-something%. And even the various issues, I think the worst issue I've seen in terms of polling was like 60-something% or something like that. So in that case, the majority of Americans are for police reform. So if both things lead to the same outcomes, but one has like down to like a 9 to up to a 40% approval, but the other one has like a range of like 60 to 90% approval, why would you not go for the 60 to 90%? It makes more sense. Just do that. Stop.
It's a rhetorical trick.
Yeah, they just want to stick with their.
You pull the rhetorical trick right. You still defund the police eventually, how far to go? Because there's a part of me that, when I say with Harry, I'm like, no, you're not far enough. We should be making it illegal to be a cop and lock every single cop up in jail for murder and hate crimes.
And that's also another thing too about the optics. It's not just people think it's defund the police means actually abolish police. There have been literal BLM activists that do say, yeah, when we say defund the police, we do mean abolish them. Just like I showed Harry a video of 2 years ago. Or whenever
also go through and lock up most or all of them.
Yeah.
All cops or everything.
So yeah, like optically, in order to win, you have to play the optics game too. Defund the police is just bad optics. Police reform is a optics win and would do the exact same thing as defund the police wants.
It's like you're trying to be unpopular. It's like you're actively waging a campaign to try to be unpopular.
This is definitely a problem with the lefties online.
Like, how many people can I turn off? How many people can I get to turn away from the movement?
Particularly with the dork crowd.
I mean, pretty much not even many liberals or leftists even watching much anymore, is there? So it probably doesn't make a difference in that regard.
What it sounds like you're doing. Now, you might disagree with me on that, but you'd be wrong.
Enough Harry-style lefties.
Saying like, oh no, this doesn't have negative effects. Sure it does. Look at how low it polls when you ask people if they support that. So, it's not, if you're in politics, the public isn't failing you. You need to find a way. You're failing the public, so you need to find a way to get your message across that's palatable, that gets more people on your side. So, I never would have supported the slogan defund the police. I think it actively hurts. I think the left should basically rebrand itself as tough on crime that should actually be crime. And get rid of the things that are crimes that shouldn't be crimes. No more drug war. No more
which some of these things that are crimes, we're actually going to be coming up too as some of his unpopular takes. So be on the lookout for that eventually too.
Really over nothing. That's what I think the message should be. But yes, I mean, there are going to be some people on the left. This is why this is one of my unpopular takes, because there are going to be plenty of lefties who will still defend defund the police.
Like Harry.
Vociferously. And they'll also still defend the idea of like being soft on criminals. Murderers, rapists.
That one I've never seen before. I think that's more of a straw man.
Most of the time, it's usually international things. Mostly round up giving Russia and China a free pass because the West still are imperialist, genocidal terrorists, and that means and it's only imperialism when the West does it. Therefore, Russia and China can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, because I think that's more of a straw man, Kyle's part. I don't think I've ever seen people say, "Oh, if you commit murder, let's be easy on you." I've never seen that before. Have you?
Yeah, it's not.
I want to have rehabilitation.
As I said, it's not domestically that usually happens. It's usually the going easy on
Russia and China.
It's part of a criminal justice system too. I just think it's naive to think only rehabilitation makes sense and it can work in any situation. No. Some people are just beyond rehabilitation. They are.
And we're actually going to get into this topic when it comes to death penalty, which will be up soon too.
And sometimes you need a mix of both rehabilitation and punishment.
Yes.
For crimes that are egregious enough. So that does make me perhaps more tough on crime than a lot of lefties, but that's why this is in the Kyle's Unpopular Takes series.
So, what do you got to say about that? Do you think that was an unpopular take?
A bit of a straw man take, kind of a thing.
Yeah, that was a lot of it was a straw man. I think, although that might be up there as one of the more unpopular takes so far, especially with a whole bunch of lefties.
Yes.
So yeah, this so far is probably the more unpopular takes of his, but we pretty much agree with everything he said on this one.
Yeah.
Alright, so guess what? We're now halfway through his unpopular take, so yay, about time. Now, we're going, ooh, let's see. Oh yeah, 2 in a row involving crimes that shouldn't be crimes. So here's on the next one on the list, prostitution.
Yep, there we go.
Kyle's Unpopular Takes, here we go. Prostitution. I think it should be legal, I think it should be taxed, I think it should be regulated. Now, why is this controversial? It's controversial because there's a lot of, really, cornerstone, prominent voices on the left. Like, the old school, ride or die representatives of leftism who totally disagree with me on this. So you have Noam Chomsky, who thinks all sex work is basically inherently exploitative, and we shouldn't legalize it, we should change the conditions on the ground to make it so sex work basically wouldn't have to exist.
That's never going to happen.
If you have a non-exploitative economy, he thinks nobody would want to do sex work. No, got some bad news for you. There'd still be some people who want to do sex work.
Yeah, especially for men. Us men have sexual needs, and prostitution is one way to get us that that urge fixed. Remember, prostitution was called the oldest profession in the world for a reason. Remember, it's gonna always be around no matter what.
I'm not saying that nobody gets into it because they've been exploited and they get into it for the wrong reasons and it's about money and all that stuff. Plenty of people get into it for that reason, and I feel terrible for those people, and I wish they didn't have to do that. But there are also people who genuinely like sex and want to get involved in the sex industry. And
yes, just like there's actually, for all of you who don't know, there's one place in America that prostitution actually is illegal. Legal. And it's a county in Nevada outside of Vegas. And I remember Fox and other news stations actually went to this brothel in Nevada County, wherever it was, and they actually interviewed the prostitutes there. And you know what they said? They actually enjoy doing their job there. They don't feel exploited whatsoever. Yeah. There are people, men and women, because prostitutes are not just always women, that do enjoy sex work. There's nothing wrong with it. It's it's how they got into it and what they're dealing with. That's the problem. But the sex work itself is not an issue.
They would actively choose to do that no matter what conditions you set up around it, no matter how non-exploitative the rest of the economy would be. So Noam Chomsky would be against this. Chris Hedges would be super against this. There's sex positive and sex negative feminists, and there's sex positive and sex negative leftists. And, again,
and I'm in sex positive.
Sex is a part of being a human being. There's some percentage of the public that's asexual, and so they just really have no interest in sex. But obviously, the overwhelming majority of people are sexual to one extent or another, and it's part of being a human being. It's part of human nature. Mm-hmm. We can pretend like it doesn't exist and try to shun any economy around it, or we can be honest about the fact that it exists and try to set up an economy around it that is fair, that is just, that is regulated, that is safe, and I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So prostitution is legal just outside of Las Vegas, and there's never been an STD transfer there because the people are tested regularly. Now, compare that with a place where sex work is banned and it's underground, and you have people, spreading diseases
Abusive pimps.
Because it's not regulated and it's not safe, and you have dangerous people who run the markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another example, sort of like with alcohol prohibition, sort of like with the drug war. There's a market there, and there's a need there that's going to be exploited one way or the other. You can ban it and pretend like you're fixing the problem, or you can be honest about the fact that you haven't fixed the problem, and you can set up a system that's more fair, more just, more egalitarian, more regulated. And so I really think it's a no-brainer. I think prostitution should be legalized, taxed, and regulated all around the country.
Yeah, you need to make it you need to do it. You need to legalize it because if people want it, they should be able to get. You need to tax it so we can make money off it, and you need to regulate. And this is something I've noticed too. A lot of countries, because there are a lot of countries in the world that prostitution is legal, but here's one thing that they do that really annoys me. A lot of them have this weird like policy where you can sell sex, but you can't buy it. Like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? How does that even work? And then, and also a lot of these countries also have brothels illegal too. So basically, if you do prostitution, it's just you individually. No, brothels need to be legalized because you can use them as a business to regulate them. Whereas if it's an individual, they're not going to be as likely to make sure they're getting STDs and stuff like that and be in dangerous positions. You need to have brothels where people go to fuck prostitutes, where it's safe, legal, and you get money out of it. And you can use that money to help prevent like STDs and other programs and stuff like that.
And I mean, I just want to be clear though, guys. I'm not saying this is a panacea. I'm not saying that once you do this, everything's great and taken care of. You never have to worry about problems ever again. No. I'm saying
it'll be most certainly
this
a lot
would be an
better.
Industry like any other industry, and you have to be vigilant and on top of it to make sure everything is safe and regulated and fair. But to just sort of cover your eyes and act like, well, the sex industry wouldn't exist if we had a fair economy. No, Noam Chomsky, that's not how it would work. No, Chris Hedges, that's not how it would work. And I don't think, what I would say to Noam Chomsky and Chris Hedges is this. Who the hell are you to determine what some woman who would say, this isn't exploitative and I chose to do this and I want to do this? Who
are you, Kyle, to say it's only women that do prostitution?
Who are you to tell them what they can and can't do? Your interpretation of their life overrides their own interpretation of their own life? No, get out of here. Again, I'm more than willing to concede. Plenty of people would say, yes, this industry is exploitative. I got into this industry because I had no other options. If I had other options, I would go into other fields. So yes, we have to fix the economy where people like that who are being exploited don't end up in sex work. But don't pretend that that's 100% of people in sex work. It's just not. It's just not. And when somebody says, I chose to do this and I want to do this, and who are you to tell me not to? Listen to them too. I'm willing to listen to all of them and take each one of their stories at face value. Noam Chomsky and Chris Hedges are not. So, obviously I would say if you're a feminist, if you're a leftist, I just think that sex-positive feminists and sex-positive leftists are more realistic about human beings, and they don't have an impossible utopian idea about sex and about fixing the economy and about getting rid of exploitation. Even if you got rid of all exploitation, there would still be sex, there would still be sex workers, and that is okay as long as it's a fair, safe, just system that they're working under. So, anyway, prostitution, just like gambling, legalized, taxed, and regulated everywhere.
Yep, 100%. So do you think that was an unpopular take?
No.
Yep, we agree completely with what Kyle said. That overall might be the most unpopular take so far, because it's something that both the left and the right, a bunch of left and right are against prostitution.
Yeah, for very different reasons, I've noticed.
Yeah, the left
for very different reasons.
The left is against prostitution because they think it's exploitative. The right is against it because it's immoral and stupid stuff like that. This is the first position that both sides in some regards are going to disagree with him on. But there actually was a poll, I remember Kyle covered this several years ago, where almost 50% of Americans support making prostitution legal, and no one is supporting it at all, which is the crazy thing. So yeah, that is an interesting one. And speaking of gambling, since Kyle mentioned it, that's our next unpopular take video.
Kyle's unpopular takes. This one I think might be really unpopular. Gambling. I think gambling should be legalized nationwide. Usually the way it works is if somebody wants to build a casino somewhere, you got to go through the government. There's got to be some zoning laws. I know in New York State, they brought it to the people and they did a direct ballot initiative to ask if they can create a casino in upstate New York. I voted yes on that. Now the reason this is controversial is because many on the left have the position that gambling is like inherently exploitative and you're just shaking down poor people. It's just another example of like a tax on the poor, a TAX, a tax on the poor, not ATTACKS. And since that's what it is, they're exploitative by their very nature, and it should be banned. It shouldn't be allowed. Totally disagree. I mean, even if it was that, there's something to be said about having the freedom to do with your money whatever you want to do with your money, in a way that's not hurting anybody else. It would only be hurting you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to me, is that even if it has some societal ill effects, so does alcohol. Should we ban alcohol? No, we shouldn't. Are there, will more addicts end up getting addicted to gambling and ruining their lives and having issues? Sure. But then there's also going to be many who will not. And it's the 80-20 rule from Carl Hart. Now, technically this is for drugs. This isn't for gambling, but I reckon it's about the same. 80% of the people who go to a casino can handle it and take care of their business and then go about their life, and maybe 20% get addicted and screw things up. I don't think you ban it for the 80% because the 20% have an issue. I think it's basic freedom. Everybody knows me. When it comes to social issues, I lean as much in the direction of freedom as I possibly can. And this is one of those issues where I don't even think it's difficult. I think it's pretty much a no-brainer. It's weird to me that the government sets up these lotto things where they benefit from it, but they ban other forms of gambling, private forms of gambling. I think that is more exploitative. I think people should be allowed to gamble if they want to gamble. People should be allowed to set up a gambling business if they want to set up a gambling business. There might be some downsides to it, but there's also the upside of increased freedom and liberty. Legalize it anywhere and everywhere, and you also have there is job creation also that comes about as a result of it. That was the original reason why they were looking in upstate New York, because there was areas that were lagging economically, and it was a big job creator. It was a big job creator to bring put a casino there. So even though many people interpret them as exploitative and think they have deleterious effects, and they're worth more trouble than not, I look at it and I say people should be able to do with their money whatever they want to do with their money as long as they're not hurting anybody else. It's a freedom issue, and of course you should heavily regulate these things to make sure they're more fair and just, and the wages of the workers should be higher. Of course, all that stuff is true, but generally speaking, yeah, I'd legalize gambling nationwide. I think this one's a no-brainer.
So, do you think that was an unpopular take?
Oh, really?
Yep, I pretty much agree with him. Gambling should be legal. If people want to gamble, go ahead. Nothing's going to stop them. Now, for me, the only time I've ever gambled is the slot machines in Pokemon games. That's all the gambling I've done, and I have no interest in ever doing gambling. But if you want to do it, go.
What I usually do is just get up and just turn yourself on the house, get a payday, and go around the wild Pokemon, just endlessly use payday, grind out tons of money, and then just buy enough coins to get what I want.
But there are, believe it or not, this is like another issue, like with prostitution, where a lot on the left and right are against gambling for different reasons, exploitation and immorality. There's nothing wrong with it, and when it comes to like the exploitation, I'm pretty sure most of that would probably be more like people with gambling addictions that can't stop gambling when they know they need to. Well, guess what? Legalize, tax, and regulate gambling, and use that tax money to fund programs to help gambling addiction. Just like down here, there's a horse racetrack several miles down where I'm at, and a huge casino down there. It's like the biggest casino in the Delmarva area. And on TV, if you watch TV, they have programs all the time about gambling addiction. Like, that's what you need to do. But if people want to gamble, they should be able to. Alright. So now, this, I think, might be up there with the first one as a long one, too, which is unfortunate, because I don't want to take too much longer. But here we go. Borders and immigration. Oh, 8 minutes, okay.
Alright, Kyle's Unpopular Takes. This is one of those takes where my position is popular if you poll the entire country, but where I generally fit on the political spectrum, and the political camp that I'm normally in, my take is wildly unpopular in this camp, in left-wing political junkie circles. So it's
more
the
like
issue of
Vosh.
immigration and borders.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
very simply, I don't think borders are inherently bigoted
or allies.
or racist or xenophobic or problematic. I actually think borders are necessary. And the reason I say that is...
Yeah, that's what a lot of people like on the left says, that borders are racist. No, they're not. No.
It's very simple. It's for organization's sake and process sake and administering good government sake. So, obviously, the further away you get from a local population, the harder it is to govern and the harder it is to have a streamlined, efficient process. So, in this country, for example, we have Social Security and Medicare. That goes to old people. The only way you can have a functioning welfare state and those programs work is to have borders. And so you limit the number of people who can get those programs. There's an old saying, you can either have a welfare state and borders, or no welfare state and no borders. And this is something that libertarians, hardcore right-wing Ayn Rand-style libertarians, have understood for a long time. In fact, they are in favor of open borders. And they're in favor of open borders because they know it would effectively destroy the welfare state if you open the borders up. Bernie Sanders had a very famous quote that open borders is a Koch brothers proposal because they, of course, want access to what they view as cheap labor that can undercut American workers and can lower pay. So there are some left activists, there's some left politicians, although none of them have actually proposed open borders, but there are some left activists who are open about the fact that, no, I want open borders.
Vosh.
And then there's others who don't say they want open borders, but the logical consequence of the policies that they argue for are open borders. So, if you say, I want to ban all deportations, I want to stop all deportations, and that was a left ask of Biden when Biden got to office. Prevent all deportations, the promise to stop all deportations. Well, stop and think about that. That means anybody who comes into the country at any time, by definition, cannot be kicked out, which means they have to be allowed to stay. That is open borders. You are asking Joe Biden to basically do open borders. Now, I'm not saying that Obama wasn't too harsh and restrictive on immigration. He was. He broke the deportation record. I'm not saying that Biden isn't too much like Trump on immigration. He is. And they're not humane, and they're not altruistic, and they don't abide by human rights and civil rights. So I'm not saying there's not stuff to critique there. But I am saying that, am I okay with deporting proven violent criminals? Absolutely I am.
Same.
Absolutely I am. I have no problem with that whatsoever. So would I ban all deportations? No. Because again, I don't believe...
I would ban it, though, for people who have lived here for years and years and years and are not causing problem, though. Those people just need to become citizens.
Believe in having open borders. So if you want to have a functioning welfare state, and I do, I'm a huge fan of the welfare state, you have to have borders. And what I would say is, a nation state exists because we haven't come up with a better way to do this thing. We haven't come up with a better way to live and function in a civilized society. And it's like the least bad of all bad options. So to abolish all borders and attempt to abolish the state, I mean, maybe in some future utopian system where we've evolved much more than we are now, we can make that come to fruition.
Yeah, I think that will happen in the future
Certainly
at
not
some
now.
point.
And I don't think that states are inherently oppressive by their very nature. I think it depends on the details. The devil's in the details.
Vosh would be very triggered hearing that.
With your government and with your nation state. So if your nation state is providing health care and education and paid vacation time by law and good benefits, if you have a Scandinavian-style system, I would argue that's really not that oppressive at all.
Yeah,
in fact,
nothing wrong with nation states. It's just what that nation state does is the issue.
They don't do oppressive foreign policy either, so in many ways, they're nation states that are functioning in a moral way, you could argue, in an ethical way. So I think this is one of those issues where, again, most Americans would agree with me that borders can exist and you can have a process when it comes to immigration, and you can vet people, and you can determine who's allowed in and who's not allowed in. Refugees, obviously, should definitely get their day where you listen to them and make the decision accordingly. But left activists, many of them are open and honest with the fact that they want open borders, and many of them, just a logical consequence of the policies that they push for, would be open borders. I don't think that's popular, and I don't think that makes sense, you know? But the final point I'll make is this. I still do, though, even though I believe in borders, and I believe in having a process for immigration, I do think we should lean heavily on the side of be humanitarian, be altruistic, be just when determining who can come in and who can't come in. Because, yeah, there are most people who are fleeing some country, wherever it may be, they're fleeing violence and oppression, and they're looking for an opportunity
and
to
most
make
that's
their
caused
life,
by us.
more peaceful and secure. And all of the data shows that immigrants and refugees that come into this country, they almost live the American dream even more than Americans live the American dream. Like the crime rate among both documented immigrants and undocumented immigrants is much lower than native-born American citizens.
And then the funny thing about that, too, is if they have a second generation, crime goes up with them. So they assimilate in that regard.
So stop and think about that. The whole stereotype of, like, they're violent and they commit crimes, that's fundamentally not true according to the data. The overwhelming majority of them are good people who are just trying to get by and do the right thing. And very rarely do people actually want to leave the place of their birth, where, you know, they want to leave everything they know and go to a place with a different language and all that stuff. That's very rare. So there's usually a really good reason why people are leaving. So, you know, if I was in control of the system, we have a vetting process and we'd be intelligent about it and we weed out violent criminals. But, you know, be humanitarian, be altruistic, believe in civil rights, believe in human rights, believe in justice. And if people, you know, pass through the vetting process, then you let them in and even give them citizenship. So I'm not arguing for let's have borders and be really tough on immigration and really tough on refugees or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying the concept of a border is okay and is not inherently oppressive. And the concept of vetting and determining who can and can't come in is also okay. So again, these things might seem relatively obvious to you if you're watching this. That just means you're more in the camp of most Americans. But I run usually in left circles, and in left circles, sometimes the position I'm taking is viewed as, I don't know if people would say bigoted, xenophobic, and words that are that harsh, but they might say too restrictive, they might say too conservative or too moderate. I disagree. And I think it actually, to one extent or another, is sort of political suicide to get out there and openly argue for open borders. No left Congress people argue for open borders. Some of them argue for policies that the effect is kind of open borders, but none of them really argue for open borders. There's a reason why. Because it's really unpopular in the entire country. And also, I just think it's not a good idea. So anyway, there you have it. That's my take on immigration and borders. Got to keep myself honest, got to keep you guys honest, and my job is not just to come out here and tell everybody exactly what they want to hear. My job is to come out here and tell you exactly what I think, give you news and information and give you exactly what I think. And here's one where, you know, perhaps I, with my audience, might not be the most popular, but got to tell you exactly what I feel.
So do you think that was an unpopular take?
Somewhat. But we kind of agree with a lot of that. So.
Yeah, only people like Vosh are going to have a problem with that, but they're a minority anyway. He actually, honestly, didn't get really into much detail like I thought he would. So for me, like, immigration is not really that important to me. For me, if everyone should be allowed to come in as long as they pass a background check. If you want to have, like, a quota system, maybe depend on how big it is. I mean, how huge it is. If you want the wall, maybe we could do that if I get something out of it. The main thing I don't like is
if it's probably funded as part of a multi-trillion-dollar public infrastructure bill.
Well, remember we talked about months ago, I mean a long time ago, for me in order to like support the wall, like I'm gonna need something out of it too. Like, you gotta stop demonizing immigrants. You need to give a pathway to citizenship for these people, because there's 13 million illegals in the country. What are you gonna do with them? Because guess what? I'm not gonna support deporting all of them. Most of those people are good people that are trying to live your lives just like you, I, and anyone else. So I want them to stay, and I want them to become American citizens. So if you give me that, maybe I'll give you your wall then. but you gotta stop demonizing them. But that's pretty much all I have to say about immigration, and I'm sure you pretty much agree.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, that might be up there as Kyle's also unpopular take, along with by the left, just like with not prostitution. Prostitution was mixed. Oh, cops! I was thinking of the cops one. All right, so now on to number 8, political violence.
All right, my unpopular takes. Here we go. Political violence. This is one that I've had many disagreements with people on the left over the years. So my take on political violence is very simple. It's the best thing I could come up with. I don't think there are any good answers here, but the least bad answer, in my opinion, is this. Violence is only okay when it comes to imminent self-defense.
Yeah.
Any other use of violence is unacceptable and wrong, morally and ethically. So, now what does that look like in practice? Because that's what really matters. In theory, it's easy to say what I just said, but what does that look like in practice? Well, it does mean that I'm not in favor of, like, violent riots or, I think property damage is obviously very different from damage to human beings. But generally speaking, I like to avoid any sort of violence unless it's absolutely necessary. So the only time I would use violence is for imminent self-defense. That goes for foreign policy when it comes to wars, and that goes for personally. I would never, attack somebody or go after somebody unless they do something to me first or they come at me first. I even feel that way when it comes to dialogue and discussion. Like, I'm a very, I don't know what a lot of you guys think of me, but I'm very, like, I'll be kind and I'll be open and I'll be good faith and I'll hear you out and everything. Until I feel like you take a shot at me that's a low blow or unfair, then I sort of defend myself and will get irate and can kind of fire back in an aggressive way.
Just like I had to deal with idiots on Monster Community earlier.
The reason why I've argued with people on the left about this for a long time is very simple. Because, when there's a riot, for example, after something happens, I'm against it. I'm against it.
Yeah.
If there's some murdering of an unarmed black person from a cop, obviously I condemn that, and we should do police reform immediately to try to prevent this from happening in the future. But if the response to that is to go out and burn down a grocery store that a lot of people in the black community go to, that doesn't make any sense. And
that's
not only
like, if you want to lose a multinational corporation or a really big business, that's okay. It's easily justifiable.
That's
so anything like medium-sized business or smaller, no.
I'm against all of it, and it doesn't matter to me if they can recover for it, whereas business can't. You still should not be rioting no matter what. And also, not only does it hurt people,
I think it's justifiable. If it's big business and multinational corporations, but not like mum and pop shops, small businesses, or even really medium businesses.
But here's the thing, though. Not only does it hurt people, and also hurt yourselves, too, because a lot of these places will just move out of your community, so that's less jobs for you. It looks bad. And as we talked about with defund the police, if you want people to be on your side, you have to also win the optics game. And guess what? We actually talked about this before, like when George Floyd was killed. Like, the first few days before, like, all the protests happened after he was killed, up to, like, 80% of Americans supported BLM. Shot all the way up. Everyone, even dipshit far-right retards that we mock on this show all the time, said that was wrong what happened to him. But once the protests started, and then once all the rioting happened, regardless of what caused it, because there were a lot of right-wing and cop that instigated it, it just looked bad to BLM, and then the riots became associated with BLM, and then the polls, like, within, like, a week or two, shot all the way back down to, like, 50%. Just like that. Like, all that momentum gone just like that. So, you shouldn't be doing rioting. What?
Thanks, cops and far-right agitating fucknuts.
Yeah.
And black nationalists fucknuts, too.
Yeah, because
I think we found most of them, pretty much the remaining 7%. The rest that was not far-righters or cops were either Black Bloc or Black Separatists.
Yeah, like 93% of BLM protesters in the George Floyd protests were peaceful. The other 7% weren't, but that was because of multiple factors, with a lot of it being either right-wingers in there instigating it or cops instigating it. Like, that's actually a common thing for all of you who don't know.
Very few, lefty, put that next in quotation marks, instigators were either black bloc, who were anarchists, and black separatists, just wanting to smash, to attack white businesses and white people.
That's violence that's sort of unacceptable and not okay. Now, there are two schools of thought on this, though, because different things have worked. So, for example, in South Africa, Mandela was viewed as the reasonable, kind person that the white authorities could work with during apartheid. But then there were people in the streets who were rioting and who were causing trouble. And what happened was, it was a good cop, bad cop situation where the white authorities in apartheid South Africa were like, we can't work with these crazy people burning down the streets and rioting and doing violence. We can't do it. But we can work with Mandela. And so Mandela was able to go to them and be like, my friends, it's them or it's me. So you want to make a deal? Let's make a deal. But, as Malcolm X says, it's either the ballot or the bullet. You either give us our rights or you got that to deal with. So in that sense, you can't argue that violence wasn't helpful. It absolutely was helpful. It was helpful to have Malcolm X and the hardliners to Martin Luther King Jr. So there is something to be said about good cop, bad cop, about the violence yielding results. But I always felt like, well, if there's a way we can get the same positive results without the violence, I'd obviously prefer that. Which leads to the next point, which is there was a giant academic study that came out not too long ago about the civil rights movement, and they found that the reason why the civil rights movement worked is precisely because they were nonviolent. And so what would happen is you have Martin Luther King and these young civil rights activists, and they would march, they'd be in favor of peace, and that was their message. It was very clear that was their message. And then when you had the racist Alabama sheriffs sick their dogs and fire hoses on these peace activists, people looked at that and said, this, and I'm talking about white America here, the white moderate that MLK has derided correctly in the past. The white moderate looked at that and said, that's not okay. I'm with the activists. I'm with the civil rights people. I'm not with the Alabama sheriffs. What are they doing?
Yeah, so, like, what happened with, it was the reverse with, like, the BLM protest. The cops had the bad optics, so they looked bad to most people, so then they supported the peaceful protesters.
Why are they being violent against people who are clearly peaceful and would not hurt a fly? And so what happened is the sentiment of mainstream America flipped. Previously it had been with the white authorities in the segregated South. That led to the feeling of the white moderate to flip and be completely on the side of the civil rights activists, and that helped lead to eventually getting the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act and things of that nature. So in that instance, it was almost a commitment to pacifism and nonviolence that led to the positive change. Because you had this very clear example of morally right and morally wrong. It's morally right to advocate for peace, and then even when you're getting dogs sicked on you and fire hoses sicked on you, you're not fighting back. You're just saying, hey, look, this is what we get for advocating for the right thing. It's Jesus' philosophy. Turn the other cheek. You hit this cheek? Okay, hit this one too. Go ahead. So that's an instance of the same, of different tactics working to the same end. You have the good cop, bad cop, political violence approach in apartheid South Africa, and you have the basically pacifism, non-violence, violent approach of Martin Luther King and the civil rights activists. Both of those things worked. So given that we seemingly have our choice, I would choose the thing that I feel is morally and ethically superior, which is the non-violence while also succeeding. But it's hard. It's difficult. And maybe it does, hand in hand with that goes, you got to get your ass kicked to make people feel sympathy for you so that they side with you. That might be part of the deal. But that's always been my standard. My standard is the only time political violence is okay is imminent self-defense. I'm actually not a pacifist. I don't believe that, you shouldn't defend yourself, but I think basically you should only defend yourself. And I think you can sort of walk that line and still get positive results and still get societal change. It might take a little more time, a little more dedication, and a little more discipline among the movement. So however we can avoid creating unnecessary victims, that's what we should do. And I don't judge people who disagree with me on this. I don't judge people who want to take a more militant approach. I understand why they would do that. I just think we should always try to avoid becoming the thing that we hate. And the last thing I'd want to do is create people unnecessary harm and be an oppressor while nominally fighting against oppression. You understand what I'm saying? So anyway, that's my take on political violence. Like I said, I always end up arguing with some people on the left in these moments because there are people on the left who look at a riot or something after a police shooting and they're like, I get it, totally fine, go ahead, do it. I think that's a little glib, and I don't fault people for believing that, because if they think that's the only way to get change, okay, then so be it. But I think there are ways to get it where we can be more moral and more ethical. But yes, my stand on political violence, only for imminent self-defense.
So do you think that was an unpopular take?
Like, for me, I can understand certain things, but not like, what was I going to say? Like certain bits, but like certain things you can understand, but as I said, you've got to watch the optics.
Yeah. Like it done.
I think that's the thing that I think it's so what frustrates me with the door left is that they don't care about optics.
Hey, near dude idiots like Vosh Eater who also support this shit, remember?
Vosh are just the same. There's something else Vosh and doorknobs have in common.
Because yeah, Vosh actually supports.
It's crazy that so many that those two groups hate each other so much that even fans on both sides think the other are CIA plants. I wish I was joking. There are doorknobs who think that Vosh is a CIA plant, including Like, how do you some of the fence about Vosh being a CIA? Because apparently there is one member of quote unquote member of Red Tube who was actually a member of the CIA. But said, and there are people on so Jimmy Dore's taken that and used that to say that all of Red Tube are members of the CIA. And then in response, let's see, Sam did a video, and about 10% of his fans were like, Dore's the CIA, maybe Dore's the CIA plant. Went to Bosch, and then it was like, half his fans were like, Dore's the CIA plant.
But yeah, like here's... So yeah, you should always never get violent whatsoever. Only get violent in imminent self-defense, and when you do rioting and stuff like that, you're gonna look bad no matter what if you think it's justified or not, and that's always a loss for you.
Yeah, the only thing I'd note is that when it comes to looting, in my view, when it comes to looting the big businesses and multinational corporations that have been screwing us forever, it is just, I may not always agree with it, but I can understand it.
I can understand, but I'm...
They're desperate people, things like that, want to get back at multinational corporations. And that's one of it's like the only thing they can think of to do it.
That just makes them look bad, though, and not going to get any change whatsoever. And then, of course, you have the idiots that still loot shit anyway, like what happened to Mayumi's family, remember?
Yeah.
And then
I remember that.
And then you have idiots at this... This is one thing that also annoys me, too, about, like, this stuff. Like, every time I bring up, like, the riot and all that crap, they're like, all you care about is property. You don't care about people and dying and shit like that. How about both are important? How about that? How about that? What, you don't think if you destroy people's property, it doesn't hurt them? Like, did Mayumi ever tell you how much her dad lost when his stuff was looted?
It was like...
into the $10,000.
How much?
Like into the $10,000.
That's a fair bit.
That's a lot of money, for crying out loud. You don't think... Like, her family's rich, so they are okay probably to sustain it, but others? Probably not. So yeah, property also matters too. Both things are important. You are dismissing property because you care more about the people too much in that regard. You gotta care about both. Like, god damn. It's like really annoying.
I mean, it would fall like, I mean, my Amy's parents would fall under small, maybe medium business. So they've been the ones where there'd be no reason to loot them. No justification for looting them. Like I said, I don't think it's wrong, but it's justifiable for big and multinational businesses. Anything under that, absolutely not.
I'm just against it no matter what. Alright, so now we're down to the final one. Drugs. Here we go.
Kyle's unpopular takes. This one you all knew was coming. Drugs. What's my take on drugs? Legalize, tax, and regulate drugs. Now, a lot hinges on that last word, regulation. It is not so clear. It is not so straightforward. How you regulate. There's going to be a lot of debate. There's going to be a lot of wiggle room. There's going to be a lot of different interpretations as to how you do that. But my general feeling is lean on the side of freedom and liberty as much as possible while still doing some basic bare minimum regulation. So, am I going to legalize fentanyl, what's basically a horse tranquilizer where it could kill you if you take the tiniest amount? No, I'm not. Will I legalize other opiates or opioids, though, that people can get over the counter? Yes. I think the reason why this is an unpopular take of mine is that the rest of the country hasn't caught up yet. The country's caught up on marijuana, where everybody says, yeah, legalize that one, that one's fine. The country's caught up on maybe some psychedelics. Okay, you can legalize some of those or decriminalize those, that's fine. The country definitely hasn't caught up on uppers, on downers, on cocaine, on things of that nature. They think, well, certain drugs are just too dangerous and other drugs are not that dangerous, and so keep the really dangerous ones banned and keep the not dangerous ones decriminalized or legal. My take on it is you should basically take the safest version of all different kinds of drugs and legalize, tax, and regulate it, and it can even be commercialized. That's probably my biggest difference with even other lefties, where many lefties would say decriminalize all of them, but only legalize the safe ones. I say legalize the safe-ish versions of all of the drugs, and even allow them to be commercialized.
Where someone is selling meth or ice, just throw them into a box and yeet the box off a cliff.
Well, that wouldn't even be possible that would be very unlikely in the first place if all drugs were legalized and regulated, because stuff like that would probably be gone because no one would probably get it anymore.
Jobs can be created as a result of them. So it's not just decriminalization means you're sort of leaving it in a legal gray area, like you can't be locked up for selling it or using it. I go a step further, where, again, it can be legal, it can be regulated, it can be commercialized, where people can sell magic mushrooms through a particular company and have different brands and different flavors or whatever the hell. Yes, I would make it part of the economy, and I would make it a job, a way to create jobs as well. And now I think that one of the things we should do is levy a tax, and the tax money goes towards rehabilitation efforts. So I would have universal rehab as part of the Medicare for All system in my ideal system. So if people do have a problem, they can go and, get that taken care of and get it taken care of.
Just like I said earlier about gambling.
For free. But, I think that you shouldn't take away these things from the 80% who can use them responsibly because 20% can't. And that roughly is the number based on Dr. Carl Hart's research, and he's an expert on this stuff. So legalize drugs, tax drugs, regulate drugs. I would make sure that the crocodile or fentanyl or the most dangerous substances, bath salts, certain kinds of bath salts, that cannot be legalized. But softer versions of uppers or downers or hallucinogenics, psychedelics, they can be legalized. And I think this is the freedom position. I think that this is the liberty position. And I think even with embracing freedom, you can still have a relative amount of safety. Because when you have these things legal, everything's out in the open, and then people can talk about, hey, this dose is okay, this dose is way too much. When it's underground, people don't know that stuff. And also when it's underground, it's not regulated. The products are cut with all sorts of terrible things. And you can die as a result of it, and you can OD as a result of it. So I think this position of mine, even though it's unpopular in the country, people would say legalize, tax, and regulate virtually all substances or safer versions of all substances.
This literally is his most unpopular position, but it's popular among his audience.
It's unpopular in the country. I think among libertarians, maybe my position is popular. Among some on the left, my position would be popular. But over time, I think this is one where we're going to move people, where eventually people will come more or less to my position. And I think that's a good thing because what we're doing now with the war on drugs has not worked at all.
Like this is a position that more like people say just legalize weed, which the majority of Americans support, but legalize all drugs? No, that's the one outside of his community, like us probably, pretty much the majority of Americans are against that. So, I'm sure you agree that that was an unpopular take?
That was a pretty unpopular take. That one actually was.
That's not unpopular to his audience, though, which...
Most of his audiences are the ones...
And of course, that's not unpopular to us. We support that. Legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs. Legalize it for freedom. Tax it to make money off it. And you can use that to regulate, to make it safe. And use fund programs to keep people educated on it, to use it safe. And addictions if you need it. If you're addicted to it, you can get help. So, yeah. So, of all these things... we pretty much agreed with every single one of them. Was there one that you really disagree with strongly or anything?
All of them, at least 90%, I'd say.
So, like, was there one in particular you had a problem with?
Not especially. It's like, most of them would have been nitpicks. Well, except for the bit of straw manning in one of them. I can't remember which one it was again.
That was the cops one, I think.
Yeah.
Like
a bit of straw manning there.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would probably have an issue with his unpopular takes was the one about the cops one, the somewhat of political violence, the abortion one, and there was one more. It was the corruption one. I thought he was being a little too harsh. Hey, you know what? You know what? I just realized there's one missing actually, and that was the death penalty. He did one of the death penalty. I was wondering like where the hell was it at? I looked up unpopular takes on his channel and all that. Oh, that's weird. I'm gonna look that up really quickly because that was one of them. I was like, wonder where the hell was that at? Because I'm pretty sure I mentioned we were gonna talk about that and it didn't.
Got it.
What?
There you go. Got it.
I found it too. So here we go. Hopefully now his last one, which I thought was we were down with it. Here we go. The death penalty.
Kyle's unpopular takes. The issue of the death penalty. Okay, this is an interesting one because this is one where, to this point, a lot of my unpopular takes have been unpopular in the circles I run in, left circles. But they've been popular among the broader public, in the American population. This is one of those issues where it's reversed. It's reversed. So my take is popular among left-wing circles, the circles I run in, but it's unpopular among the broader population, among the American public. So, the death penalty. Polls consistently show the American people are in favor of the death penalty. I think it's well over 50%. Maybe some polls even touch 60% of the American public are in favor of the death penalty. I'm opposed to the death penalty. Now, the reason I'm opposed to the death penalty is a little bit different than most lefties. I'm opposed to it simply because we get the wrong people. There was a study that came out years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, about how 4% of the people on death row are innocent. They're innocent. So, if you are okay with the death penalty, you are by definition okay with saying it's okay for the state to murder innocent people 4% of the time. For every 100 people put to death, 4 of them are going to be innocent. It's okay for the state to do that. I'm okay with murder sometimes. I'm okay with my tax dollars funding murder sometimes. If it's only 4%, that's okay. If you were one of those 4 people, you wouldn't feel that way. So that's my bone to pick with it. Now the other reason is I believe in violence. We'll get to a segment on this as well. I believe in violence only for self-defense reasons. That's the only time I'm morally okay with violence. And this is not a case of self-defense. I mean, you can make a stretch of an argument that this is...
He forgot another reason to be against the death penalty, too. I thought he was going to mention it, is that it's disproportionately, or whatever the term is, used against minorities. Like there's been studies on this. There's been studies on this that blacks and whites, even when they commit the same crimes, blacks usually get the death penalty much more frequently than whites. That's another reason to be against it. Systemic racism.
Societal self-defense because this person committed a heinous crime, so we got to get rid of them as a problem. But that doesn't really pass muster if the alternative is you just keep them in prison the rest of their lives. So because 4% of the time we kill the wrong people, and I'm only okay with violence for self-defense reasons, I think that the death penalty is immoral, unethical, and I also think, by the way, to make a constitutional argument, it violates the Eighth Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment. I think it is by definition cruel and by definition unusual for the government to murder you. So I don't think it's constitutional. I think it's illegal. I think it's unethical. I think it's immoral, and I think it needs to stop. Also, it is applied in a racist way.
Oh, Kyle did bring it up.
A black person and a white person can commit the same crime, but a black person is much more likely to get the death penalty for it. Mandatory minimums work the same way. They're more...
Well, but as you brought up earlier, Kyle...
Color, not as much when it comes to white people. So there's all these... There's no way you could craft a system where you always get the right people and it's applied fairly and justice really is blind. It never works like that in the real world. So I think it's a moral obligation to be opposed to the death penalty. But of course, the problem you run into, and this is a problem I run into too, is like when you get somebody who you know is a mass murderer and incredibly vicious and unrepentant and there's no hope of them to be reformed or rehabilitated, and they do something terrible, and then like some people want the death penalty, do I look at those people and I'm like, you guys need to relax, don't be unreasonable? No, I look at them and I'm like, I get it. Like, I get it. I get why you want this person to die. I get why you have that feeling of revenge and retribution and you think they deserve this. They deserve nothing better than what they did to their victims. I get it. I think it's logical. I think there's an argument there. Again, I think there are broader reasons, bigger reasons that are overarching which show why we shouldn't do it. But I can never fault people for those feelings if they feel that way. You know, so you can see my take is a little different than most lefties on this, but ultimately I end up in the same place that the death penalty should be allowed. Most Americans don't agree with us, guys, and we got an uphill climb on this one. We got a lot of work to do to change hearts and minds. Because again, between 50 and 60% of the American people say the death penalty should be legal, and they support it. So this is an issue where, it's a rare issue where we have an unpopular position with the American public, but I think in due time we can switch it, because in other developed countries, people have already turned against the death penalty, and most developed countries have banned the death penalty. Eventually, we might get there.
I think there was one time in America, I think like back in the 70s maybe, or up to like the 70s into the 80s, where I think Americans were against the death penalty by a little bit.
We did ban it for a little bit, I think in like the 1960s.
Started, and that's when they were like... It's all over again.
50s or 70s, but they brought it back, and ever since then it's still been popular, so we got a lot of work to do, but definitely against the death penalty, and that's another one of my unpopular takes.
So do you think that was an unpopular take?
It depends. In the general public, yes, but with us, not really. No.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what he said. I'm sure we're both against the death penalty, and just like what Kyle said, if there's some people, like here's the one person that always comes to my mind, Anders Breivik, that fucker killed all those dozens of people in Norway. Like, if he ever got the death penalty, would I cry about or lose any week of sleep? Absolutely not. I would not care whatsoever if he got the death penalty. I would not make any...
The guy who shot 9 black worshippers at a church should be another one.
Yeah, like, if they got the death penalty, I would not care whatsoever. But I'm still against it because 4% of the time, it could kill innocent people. That should be an automatic no for anyone. And it disproportionately, or whatever the term is, used against minorities. And also, it is kind of true at the same time that being stuck in like a prison cell for the rest of your life, that could possibly, depend on the person, maybe even more of a punishment than being killed, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, it's still...
On the extended Anders Breivik's penalty they gave him, because I think he's actually like just crossed the maximum time, but they've deemed him an acceptable risk to the public or something, and extended it out another couple of years.
Yeah, because like Norway, for example, they are very, very lenient when it comes to like rehabilitation of criminals and stuff like that. Now the stats do back up that their recidivism rate, which means the rate of people that go back to prison after they get released, it's lower. So they're doing a lot better job than America's. But at the same time, it just doesn't sit right with me a lot of times. They're like a little bit too lenient for my liking, whereas America's usually way too strict.
Yeah.
Like one thing that really pissed me off, because Kyle did a video on this several years ago. Did you know that Anders Breivik cried because he had a PS2 and he wanted a PS3? Dude, you killed 70-something people in the worst terrorist attack in Norway's history. The nerve of you to complain that you didn't have the console you want. Oh, boo fucking who. You're lucky you're not dead. Because if you did that shit in America, you would have been killed on sight, for crying out loud. That pisses me off every time I think about him crying about a console, enjoying his life pretty much in a prison cell after he killed dozens of people. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Alright, so, yeah, when it comes to the death penalty, us on the left agree with him pretty much. It's more of the general public that is against him. So, yeah, so let's go for all these again. Like we said, just with the death penalty, that's unpopular with the majority of Americans, but popular with his audience. Guns, that's probably popular with everyone except like gun fuckers and like suburban women. Conservatism, that is a little bit too weird. I don't know what to say about that one. Abortion, that only triggers like the pro-lifers and stuff like that. Corruption,
Anti-choice sexist.
Yep. Corruption, that one.
A bit too far. I think it goes a little bit too far with the penalty.
Yeah, but otherwise, I don't think most people are really against what he said per se, though. So that's one a little unknown. Cops, that one is going to trigger like the far left, like Harry. Prostitution, that triggers both extremes on both ends. Same goes for gambling. Immigration, that triggers people like Vosh. Political violence, that triggers like the far left. Drugs, that probably trigger. That is the majority of the thing Americans don't agree with. It's mostly Kyle's audience that agrees with him, and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like his unpopular takes are really not that unpopular, mostly, believe it or not, guys. That's really, like I said, from the very start, it's a weird series he did. But interesting to say the least, and hey, we finally went through it. So I hope you all enjoyed this special episode. Hopefully sometime soon in the future, we'll do that. Oh god, it's going to require a lot of research. The PragerU takedown.
We're always going to have to get together before we do the episode, just to get the videos and
yeah. We're probably
destroy them.
Honestly, if we do that PragerU special, we're going to have to pick like 3 or 4 videos we want to watch, and we're probably going to have to watch them off screen, write down everything to make sure that we can destroy it all in one go. Because that's going to require a lot, and I'm not good at debunking stuff like on the fly. I like to watch stuff first and then write down over time. But that's going to be another time in the future. Next week, we'll get back to episode 38. So, see you all next time!
Yeah.